All right, hello everybody. Hi everybody. Let's do the sound and video check. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. You're gonna smell me in a sec. I just took my shoes off.
Good.
They see you.
Can they smell me?
I'm pretty sure Texas can.
Sound okay. Sacrix has no sound, but everyone else does.
This is third world.
Okay, well let's wait a second because I want to make sure he can hear me.
Docile Bischoff says, "Stop this nude stream."
This is nowhere near to nude. That's
My delicate sensibilities are offended.
All right, looks like most people have sound.
You have to pay for that stream.
Tyler gives ankle for free.
Yeah.
Looks like we're good.
Oh, look, we got our mugs. We made sure to grab the mugs before the stream. I'm hoping mine doesn't make too much noise near the mic. Okay, so
Let's just put this fizzy drink right by the microphone.
you guys know the deal. We're gonna go through the top.
Not everybody.
Okay. If everybody is not aware, we do a top 10-ish kind of highlights update at the end of the week. We try to do this weekly, and I think we mostly succeed, except when there's a power outage. And we'll follow that up with some Q&A at the end. Please keep your Q&A focused on the subject that we are knowledgeable of.
Production and engineering.
Production, art, engineering. Can also probably answer some animation and concept art and art in general. Okay, so sorry, we just sat down so quickly. It was like, okay, print this out, run on over. Okay, top
Tyler's
10.
winded from the 10-foot walk from his desk.
Yeah. Don't get me started on me being out of shape. I need to get back into shape. Okay, testing. Okay, so Colin spent much of this week trying to track down a lingering issue that's been predominant over the last 2 weeks that we've been trying to fix. It was creating a physics server crash, which basically makes the game unplayable at that point. So we've been running an embedded server, which is not as obviously performant as running a separate server. So we've been trying to track that down much of this week. We've gotten to a point where we know that there is an issue. As Tim said, it may not be the fix to the problem. It's just an issue that does something or makes better. Tim was parsing like whether this was actually a fix. And
We have a fix that improves and fixes the symptom, which is the physics server disconnecting from the gameplay server. We're still doing a little bit of digging to make sure we found the underlying issue. For those of you who are betas who tried to hop in on the last 2 weekend tests we did, this is the issue that we've been trying to hammer out to get you guys in. So, related to testing, we've got some of the alphas in on Nuada right now, testing this. If that goes well, we would like to do a weekend test this weekend. Not promising anything yet, but there is a strong chance. And assuming this weekend goes well, we'll probably do some more testing throughout next week and hopefully get you beta guys in next weekend. No promises there. There's a lot of ifs and contingencies there, but there is a strong likelihood, and that's what we'd really like to do. So
and we haven't had the betas on this map yet.
Yeah, you guys haven't been on scenario 2 yet.
Okay, couldn't remember.
Yep.
Yeah, so we know that you're overdue. We are very aware of it. We are doing our best to track down some of these lingering issues, and we'll keep you updated throughout next week. Okay, buildings. Why don't you speak to the buildings thing?
Yep.
I gave you that separate sheet. Andrew had a last-minute addition.
So we've been working on this for several weeks now, and we're doing a big refactor of sort of how the network, or how the building state gets moved from server to client and all of that. So here's some of the stats that we've gotten out of Andrew's work. We've got a 99.2% reduction in the number of bytes required to send an entire building over the network.
Holy crap, Tim, that sounds like a lot.
That's a lot. We reduced the CPU load on the proxies from 75 milliseconds per connected client to a negligible level. So that meant for every single user that was connected to a proxy, we were spending 75 milliseconds per building. And now it's basically non-existent. Calculating changes between two states of a building now is only a few clock cycles, with comparable savings in network bandwidth for larger changes, like knocking off an entire tower. The code is basically, this is a huge change, and we've got another big huge change that I don't know if we've talked about yet, but next week we've got a bunch of big stuff that's landing, so we want to make sure we've got a
coherent.
Yeah,
we talked about that.
Okay. We want to make sure we've got a good build that we can continue testing and iterating on while we land these big honkers of changes that will likely be disruptive for a few days while we sort out other stuff. So there's some really, really cool building changes coming next week. Hopefully we'll get the coherent stuff in next week and can start doing shiny new UI things. Next week's super exciting as well. So
these were two things that we had kind of identified very early on were big things we needed to get started on early to make sure we could hit the beta 1 date. Things are going great. We're still on track for July 4th. So cool.
So that's buildings in a nutshell. Huge memory savings, huge bandwidth savings, huge CPU savings all over the place. We're really, really happy with it.
I'd buy that for $1.
Yeah.
Maybe put that on the table.
Does it look like it's going to tip over?
It does.
Could you just put the opening where all the fizz is coming out right in front of the
Yeah.
microphone so they can hear,
right here.
you can hear the soda?
And the tinkling.
Yeah. Is this your first stream?
Yeah. God, I've got so many inappropriate jokes. Keep my mouth shut.
We're tagged as adult. You're fine.
Yeah, I know.
So massive tech building update.
Yeah, and
so
so
that's next week. The work has been done over the last few weeks, but landing next week as soon as we get a solid build that we can then fuck everything up.
Dion's putting a rock in the wrong place over there.
Hey, Dion,
don't put rocks there.
Huh?
Don't put rocks there.
No, I know, I just deleted it. It isn't good.
I can see her working over there on some of the rocks.
Yeah,
Tyler's like a helicopter mom for art.
Yeah. Don't put that there. Okay.
So number 3 is what Bull has affectionately dubbed Platypus, or the application formerly known as QMan, the Camelot Unchained Environment Manager. He's sort of in the testing polish phase. We've landed it. What QMan is for us is most of the time, if you're not working with, if an engineer is not working with changing assets or anything like that, we just use the mainline asset database in sort of read-only form, and it's safe to do all that. But if you're changing the asset format, or someone else is changing the asset format and you don't want it to change, what QMan allows you to do is basically take a snapshot of the current state of the assets and build an entire stack from the database to the patch server to the patch client to, I think, your game server and your game client, to use a particular schema for assets and sort of separate yourself from the rest of the world, either to protect them from your changes or to protect you from their changes, so that working with certain categories of assets or certain builds is less disruptive and more convenient for engineers and artists alike. I think round 1 is largely an engineering tool, but we've discussed how to make it a artist tool as well. So we got that landed this week. There's a couple bugs, polish, rough edges that we discovered after it landed, and Bull is working on smoothing those edges. Warbands. So many moons ago, some of you guys got to play with warbands, and they've sort of been backlined for a while we worked on some other big stuff. JB's been this last week or so working on resurrecting warbands, and I think he said yesterday or the day before we got them in, but the push notifications for party invites weren't working, so there was no way for you guys to join a warband, and so JB's putting the finishing touches on that, if not landing it already. Oh no, it's going into review today or Monday.
Yeah. This is as long as everything else that we're
Yeah.
going to put in next
And
week
so
doesn't break everything.
it's going to be
should
on
in.
Hatchery next week. Real good chance it's going to be on Hatchery next week. And as soon as we get through all these other big changes, the coherent stuff and the building stuff, we should have parties back up and working on Hatchery. Number 5 is client skill effect debugging. So Rob landed version 1 of the skill effect debugger, which shows active effects and projectiles when using a skill. Been super happy to have these tools for diagnosing weirdness and issues, and even finding weirdness and issues with abilities, right up until the point where he realizes that he's got bugs he has to fix now because he can actually see them happen.
Yeah, earlier today, he was able to very quickly, I'll include a screenshot in today's update. He was using it, and I think it was the projectile on the server was spawning way above the character, and the client was spawning in front, and it was creating a very obvious discrepancy, but he was able to immediately recognize that this had just happened using this tool, and then said, Rob, why? Why this? See, I can even talk like Ben. Why
Always
this?
Rob, why?
Number 6.
Yeah, I'm never sure how to pronounce that. Is it Wise? Is it Wwise? Is it Wwise?
That's a good question. Let's go with Wwise. That sounds about right. I've always said Wwise.
Yeah, Wwise is our sound engine. We did an update to it, I don't know, a few months back. It was this year.
What?
I'm pretty sure. But DB's been having problems as we've been scaling up and doing these bigger tests. You beta guys have been in on Scenario 1 with the 300 players, and some of you guys who have been with us for a while have seen like 2,000 or more bots. As we've been getting back up to those numbers, we've been bumping into issues, specifically with the profiler that DB was using to analyze the sounds was crashing. So we just got a new Wwise upgrade, which fixed the profiler issues and a smattering of other issues.
Which is important because for him to work on performance, he needs the profiler to actually run.
Yeah. So we actually couldn't find where the issues were because the tool that helped us find the issues was crashing. So we did a Wwise upgrade yesterday. That went in pretty smoothly. And so Dave is working on some other issues with sounds not going away when they're supposed to, or what's functioning LOD for sounds far away, having different sounds that are less impact on resources. Art things, go.
Okay, so a lot of these are lists since we've been hitting a lot of little things in general. Environment, VFX and SFX, Mike and DB made some changes to the assets that we're using in the second scenario. What was it, Dragon Fang? Is that what Ben called it? Dragon Fang?
Yeah. So, sounds right.
So
if not, you said it on stream. That's what it is now.
Yeah, it is now. The portals that you spawn from, Mike added a quick passive VFX to the TDD and the Arthurian one. I handed off a quick task for DB to make some little ambient sounds in the case of like the Arthurian one has flames around it, so we'll need a little bit of crackling fire around that. The Place of Power's center spire VFX, there's a few different elements that kind of stack up there, so he created all the VFX from the crystal at the center, the spire up to the top, the impact on the tooth, and then I got to hand the tooth off to John to make some cracks in it and a little glow map and make it look all kind of one thing.
So Andrew and I were walking by Ben playing on the map earlier and had the new like the capture point dais with the
purple
with the cool purple on it, and we were like, how is he doing that? That's super cool.
Yeah.
And so found out that it was some VFX that Cross had done, and Cross comes over and he's like, look, you can see it came out of the edge just a little bit right there, and me and Andrew were like, how did you do this? This is amazing. Cross is like, there's a little fuzz right there.
Yeah, I hope he's listening. Yeah, so one of the items on there was the NPC the NPC spawn / capture point. It's over the last couple of weeks, we've had concept art of these different daises. Right now, the functional one is the control point one, so now there's an actual model there instead of a little gray box. And to do that, there was a point when Michelle did the concept, we picked the concept, we started modeling it, we got the model done, and then I went, I don't think you can walk on this thing because it was so deep and we were going to put all these VFX in it, but the VFX, you couldn't like run across it. So we tightened the whole thing up into this really thin layer, and then Mike just had this little sliver where he placed the VFX and used soft particles so that they don't have a hard edge when they intersect with the edges. And because the material that I put into the bottom was metal, it did. If you look at it in a later time of day or at night, the little lights that move around it actually create these little pillars of white light where they're on the. It looks really cool at night too. So that was just one of those things that, you know, exactly like you just said. Mike was like, I don't know, it's not good enough.
We're like, this is amazing.
Yeah,
how did you even do this?
Everybody else thinks it looks cool. Yeah, Caleb asked me this morning too. That looks cool. How'd you guys do that?
How is that humanly possible?
Yeah. Basically, the cool thing is it looks like it's that we're actually changing a texture, like a dynamic texture, which we're not. What else? I wrote in here, general environment dust in the wind, cue music. I asked Mike for just some little dust modes I could just kind of place around in the world. And then DB did a few audio tweaks at the beginning of the week on the Spire. There's back to the Spire. There's an ambient like hum for that energy. Then he has this really neat ambient SFX loop that takes place in over the whole pit, and it's kind of like these weird howls and crumbling rocks and things. So if you get a chance, just go stand towards the center there and listen. You'll hear it. So design-wise, I got one in here for race-specific traits. Ben added in a whole bunch of new traits over the past couple of weeks, and this week added in some race-specific ones that'll allow you guys to just create, you know, more differentiation between your characters and possibly play it.
More different rates.
More different rates. God, see, this is why I wanted you in here, because it just turns into you and I riffing off each other.
Wasting our backers' valuable time.
Following up with that, James Koo has started working on...
Because you guys are the microphone, not the camera.
Has been working on trait icons. There's about 70 of these things, so he's gone through a first pass, halfway through a second pass. Michelle's assisting him on those, and is now working on the race trait icons.
Stupid question, does that mean we have 70 traits?
I would assume so.
Okay.
Yeah, I did not specifically ask Ben, but if there are 70 icons, I'm pretty sure there's 70 traits. Okay. Take a drink break. Out of Jabba the Hutt. Okay. Number 10, work in progress art, updated character creation renders. So we're going to share a couple of these in today's update. What we're doing is, in the character creation process, we had a bunch of sketches, concept art, paint overs from really old models or from the concept art of the classes. Later, what we want to do is actually have in-game renders of animated characters standing there that are more representative of the guy you're going to play. In lieu of that tech, which is part of what we're waiting, I think is related to the coherent change.
For which part? For
doing animated in-game rendered characters in the patcher.
Yeah, maybe?
Can't remember. JB will probably tell me I'm wrong either way. So right now what we're doing...
It's a safe call.
Right now what we're doing is... Joe's been taking the characters and rigging the updated armors that look a little bit better, which is where we're going with the characters. He's been then passing those off to John. John puts them into Marmoset and does some really nice renders. Then they bounce back to Michelle to do a little bit of artwork on top, paint out any just render errors, and basically match them to the backgrounds for the different realms. And those look awesome. Like I said, look at
Marmoset?
Marmoset's mainly just a rendering program.
Oh.
Put all your assets in and it makes really pretty pictures.
Oh. Just like for staging scenes.
Right. Or just, you know, hey, I made this really cool model. I'm going to make it for my portfolio.
Beep.
Let's see. 11, concept art. This week, Michelle continued work on the character renders from John. Adjusted them to match. I'm literally just repeating what I said. Additionally, she completed a pass on the physician's belt for John to work on and is continuing to concept out... There's someone at the door. And continuing to work on the VFX concepting for Mike. The VFX concepting right now is basically a direction we want to go with all the different ability types that are differentiated between realms. This is going to be an ongoing thing. There's a lot of VFX to make on this. Mike is starting off right now just with the first special abilities, using those as a kind of a testing ground, because part of this is not only just making the sprites, but it's also just developing the ways all the sprites move and the timing and everything. So this will be an evolving process in beta as well. But you should start seeing in a few weeks here some of the new abilities will have VFX on them that'll look different than what you've seen before. 12, modeling. I put various because John hit a bunch of different things this week. The Tuatha side quiver model for the Forest Stalker, the player secondary dais, spawn dais for Scenario 2, and the Arthurian Physician's Belt, and the Tuatha Depths inspired statue material. So if you guys saw last week, he had basically, if I leave John alone for an hour, all of a sudden he's working on some other thing. He created a really funky looking screwed up statue that's in last week's update, so he finished the materials for that. The Physician's Belt will then go to Joe. He's going to rig that, make a male and female version, give Ben the IDs, then it'll be placed on the character, and Sandra will also use that asset to animate the Physician's class-specific animations too. And I'm totally excited to work on the Physician because he's gonna have some fun animations. It's a lot of bottle tossing and stuff. Let's see, environment art. So I basically copied and pasted from last week that Dion and Tyler have been doing a whole bunch of different work. This week it's been a whole bunch of ongoing terrain tweaks and improvements in the Scenario 2 map. This is a lot of small work, putting mods in very specific points, cleaning up areas, getting bushes out of the way of the pathways. I added a whole bunch of small pebbles. Dion worked on some extra birch trees. Just a bunch of those those end details that we're trying to get through right now. We've also been going through and reducing polys on some of the assets used in there, creating LODs that didn't exist, working on collision on there. If anybody who's been in the last couple of playtests is listening, please go ahead and bump into things. Still need to do a collision pass on the center assets, but let us know if you're getting hung up on stuff, and we need to be creative to keep people out of the spiky rocks. We've also been working on asset hue shifts. So in lieu of some tech that we want to do kind of procedurally later, where we tint the trees slightly different colors, just to add more variation, as nature is wont to do, we're creating some little hue shifts of the diffuse textures. And that'll just add some more variety to the world. We also went in and placed a whole bunch of the control point models in the map. Dion's continuing that. So you guys will see the purple disc we were talking about.
That won't be on this weekend's test.
It will
not.
There will be some? Oh, no, it will not. You're right. That's on the new auto prep build.
Correct.
Work in progress, art, animations. So we're continuing to work on all the class-specific idols. A whole bunch of stuff is getting finished. Actually, I mean, week to week right now, the way we're approaching the animations seems to have cut down the time it takes to do them significantly. So these lists have gotten a little bit more robust. Winter Shadow, Sandra finished up the updated basic attack, matching the new combat idol. Blackguard, she also finished up her first pass on all the movement animations at the beginning of the week. Forest Stalker, Sandra's now making sure that the hip quiver that we gave her matches the animations. This was partly a good idea on Ben's part, just to help differentiate the different archer classes visually. Fiona, Scott finished up the secondary movement animations, and then began work on the Mjolnir class, blocking out basic attacks to flex, flinch, and shout. And these blockouts all happened in about 2 days, which is significantly faster than we've been doing before. So good job, guys. That's it. That's 14 items. Yosh. Okay. So, as usual, if you guys have any questions about some of the items that are on here, what it's like to work in the video game industry, production, art, engineering, let us know.
Right, so send in your questions. We're going to do some Q&A live now. So programmer questions for Tim and art questions for Tyler. And we were getting some programmer questions this morning in Morning with Max, so I couldn't answer them then, but hopefully if you come back, you can ask them now.
This thing's huge.
Tomanus asks, will the main faction city construction and art direction be created entirely in-house, or potentially have Cube and artsy player influence? Will Cube exist to some degree in the depths?
We definitely want to get the Builders Brigade involved in constructing some of the buildings for the capital cities and the landing zones and all that, right?
Yeah, this isn't. We're going to try and what we need to art direction wise. One of the things we need to look at is the number of materials that we provide, and that's based on just how we are doing damage states and how much memory we have right now. So it's a little bit TBD, but primarily what we want to do is let some people build out a whole bunch of really cool buildings to represent a city, which will also give us a lot of testing, really, on just rendering all that stuff.
Dark Society Network asks, can a player UI mod collect and send data to an external server? If so, what player data is exposed? Chat logs? I'm thinking about privacy concerns and enemy realm espionage through popular mods.
So that is a concern. We're doing some work actually right now in terms of privacy information and securing some of that stuff. So there's sort of two aspects of this question, which is I want to gather data so that my website can present that data to our consumers, be they my guild or, you know, I'm making an armory website or something to that effect. We have web API endpoints that don't require you to scrape this data out of the game client. You can go straight to our web API endpoints and get that data from those. And in terms of privacy, we are taking steps to keep your private information private, though anything you say in a public chat channel that can be gathered by someone else's chat client isn't private.
Real Life Gobbo asks, any chance we will see any new biomes?
So this has been asked before, which I always find funny because if anybody has access to these builds, they're going to see them. I think one person asked me if there were any like surprise ones. So what we're going to do is I'm going to audit all the stuff we have right now and kind of fix up and reuse what we have, and primarily with a focus of making sure that we have the islands we need. And then any extra time that I have will be based on, making new variations of things or new biomes. In this case, I'm assuming that the word biome is being used for like a small set of stuff. So in that case, the good thing is that if, let's say we just build an island and I say there's grass over here, forest over here, and rocks over here, and then I make a swamp, I can then just very quickly, I can build out a little swamp mod and then reference it into the island's entire mod and say, okay, now 20% of it has swamp on it. So the ability to get these things in is fairly quick. It's just going to be right now a balance between getting all the other islands built out the way we want them and seeing how much time we have left. There's going to be new things. In Scenario 2, we created a bunch of new assets that can be reused, can be recolored, things like that. So there will be some new stuff, but I'm not going to commit to saying a whole new fancy thing just yet, because I want to see how much time it's going to take to get some of the home island work. Like, we're kind of going more of a quality over quantity.
I don't know if we know the answer to this, but Odilvik says, Tinnis asks, what will the state of weapon/ability bar switching be during beta, e.g. Winter's Shadow, melee, and bow weaving?
A lot of the work related to that is pending behind the coherent change. To the best of my knowledge, and Tyler's the producer, so you can correct me if I misspeak. To the best of my knowledge, a lot of the ability bar work is not slated for Beta 1 Day 1.
Right.
Which isn't to say that JB or one of the mod squatters might just not get adventurous and do it, but there's no way we're promising that. But it is certainly a thing that we want to be working on sooner rather than later once we're into Beta 1.
Yeah, the decision was basically based on there's a lot of work we could do now, but we would have to repeat again later. So we wanted to bite the bullet, get coherent in, and have a few less features so we weren't doing everything twice. We have, though, been talking about this specific issue recently and just planning that out.
CU Swazi asks, will we be getting any samples of some of the props for building decor?
So what we need to do, the BPO, the building placed objects, I haven't had a chance to play with it. I think it's been mostly on Matt and Christina working on it. It's also related to why we wanted to get Andrew's changes in and get kind of all of this building work done early. You guys will have a few things to place. What I did right now is I had Dion just go through some list of items that we had that were usable. They've been using those as test objects. It's been like a simple door and a barrel and a box and some really simple things. And then once we get a little bit farther along where we say, okay, the tool works, let's actually define a better list. What we'll do is we'll look at what we have that you guys may not even seen. It's some old stuff we made a long time ago, and then identify a few extra assets that we want to build, just making sure that we have like some basic tables, chairs, wall torch, things like that. But all of that, those specific items can all have different use cases or tech needs, like things that go on a wall versus things you can just place on the ground. So it'll be dependent on just how far the tech has gotten by the time that we have you guys in the game.
Yeah, so for those of you that have been with us for a while, this isn't a surprise. We put in a system that was testable, usable, and playable with some placeholder art assets. We want to get some miles on the system itself, and then we can figure out both what assets are the right fit and the use cases for them and the preferences from you guys, the players.
Right. This will be very early testing. This won't be like, hey, there's 400 items or something like that. We want to this is a brand new thing.
Dark Society Network asks, will the UI modding support come with a mod manager and load orders to properly mix and match mods as we know them from community managers from Bethesda games?
I'm not sure. What I believe and have spoken about, but this is more a JB question. If we get him on stream, ask him. But I believe we want a mod manager and ordering of what orders they're loaded and stuff like that.
Betadenu Live asks, just tuned in. Will classes and races have actual voice lines when they use skills, such as Scald shouting things with the abilities he uses, rather than just a magic sound effect and that's it?
Oh, there's shouts and grunts and things like that, and we will further define those things as we go. I mean, right now we're still building out a lot of the tech, like we just talked about, the sound issues that we're trying to stamp out. So it's kind of like as the tech comes online, we get farther along and what we want to do, then we'll have time then it would make sense to make more class-specific things. Right now it's, does the tech support playing a sound effect at a given point in the skill, make sure all of that's working, and then we can do more permutations of abilities. But yeah, that would be the goal, is this guy sounds like that class, just like he looks like that class.
Jay Litchfield on the YouTube chat says, this question is for Mr. T, the Barefoot Wonder. Will the effects on the characters have glowing effects on the armor, weapons, etc.?
Yeah. Will the armor and weapons have effects? Yes. It kind of depends on what it is. I mean, we've done that with we made some like kind of what do we call them? We didn't call them special swords. We made some more outlandish looking swords and weapons and things a long time ago, and some of those had effects on them. It's extremely easy to put a glow effect on stuff and have always on effects. It kind of depends on the voice that we kind of slowly define visually that works for the game that the backers like.
We've talked about stuff like engraving might do that too.
Yeah. I think we put glow maps. The TDD light armor right now has little glows on the gems that run around on his outfit, things like that.
Dark Society Network has a follow-up.
Who doesn't like glows?
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, who doesn't like glows? Yes.
Dark Society Network has a follow-up question to UI data gathering. Could you define public chat channel? Is guild chat considered public? Even private messages to a singular person are received by someone else's client.
I mean, so I am not a privacy expert, so that's a good MJ question for the next time he's on stream. But in terms of my client receives a chat message from you, regardless of what channel it's on, answering your question specifically, my UI will have access to that data. It needs to, so that players can make custom chat UIs, or for instance, Warhammer had like a green speak mod where it would green skinify all your chat, or orcify your chat or whatever. So players are going to have that at their disposal to make the mods that they need to have.
Sacrix asks, will each island piece have different environments like desert, mountain range, ice, and will it be procedurally generated total or just parts?
Will each island have different things?
Different environments like desert, mountain range / ice, and will it be procedurally generated total or just parts?
Right now for Beta 1, we're going to be taking the assets that we have. Like I said, primarily it won't be creating whole new icy mountain ranges and stuff. There's a much greater definition for launch where we do want to make everything different and unique. Right now, this is going to be more of using the assets we have, which will be repetitive, but I'm going to try and do my best to add variation in there that tries to define them as differently. Right now, the starter islands are going to be sort of hubs to get around to like the builder islands and to the contested islands and the scenarios. Once we get farther along, through beta and into launch, then we'll actually be worrying about defining these better. Plus, at that point, we'll have made a whole bunch of other environment assets and be farther along on kind of saying, okay, this is very much the TDD look, and we'll have a much more assets that we can reuse, even if we went back to the same island and edited it after the fact. And most of that will be procedural. Any of the kind of like very player-specific areas, that's all hand done. Scenario 2 is a very good example of that. There was a lot of hand placement of assets. Dion's doing that right now, and hand auditing of the terrain. And right now, we need more tools basically to be able to do a lot of hand editing of the terrain faster. So there won't be a whole lot of variation for Beta 1 Day 1, but that's the direction we're going to go in.
So also, and correct me if I'm wrong, our system in the first place, our terrain and environment system is we've called it a procedural assisted terrain system in the past. There's no place where we just say, go make a random generated island. There is always some degree of artist intervention and informing into the both the landscape itself and the decor. So there's always a bit of a hand element. What our procedural assist tool allows us to do is sort of determine how much we want to be involved in that process.
Muerta Gris on the YouTube chat wants to know if you are able to speak about what things, rain, weight, or damage, can affect the buildings.
Rain, weight, or damage.
So first of all, we have a stability system in place on our buildings, in case you were unaware, and there is frequent discussion in terms of what directions we want to take that. So know that what we have now is still in a state of flux. What we currently have in place is compression forces and shear forces, such that if you have, for instance, a lot of stone on top of a weaker, softer wood, the stone can produce too much weight and compress the wood and destroy it. Damage is also a function of that equation, so that if you have a block that is undamaged, it could support a bunch of stone, but if it takes a bit of damage, the pressure from the stone could then cause it to be destroyed. At present, the building mostly only interacts with itself with the exception of damage. So if you put a bunch of giants on top of a building, at present, they do not influence the shear or compression forces applied to the structure.
Also in the YouTube chat, Tahoe USA would like to know about how much of the game is programmed in C++ versus C# versus other.
So the game client is entirely C++. Though there are some bits where the game client and game server communicate that is written in C# and code genned into C++. The game server, and when we talk about the game server, there's a bunch of different microservices that are a part of that. Generally, when we talk about the game server, what we mean is the server running gameplay logic like damage and abilities and skills and tracking your inventory and your gear and stuff like that. The game server is basically written in C#. We've got a math library that's C++ CLI, which is C# over a C++ wrapper, and that's probably going to go away eventually. The physics server is written in C++. All of our web API servers are written in C#, and the user proxies, which is what your client actually talks to. Your client talks to a user proxy, and the user proxy talks to the game server on your behalf. The user proxies are written in C++, but there are ways for us to run what we call an embedded server. We talked about the testing we've been doing the last couple of weeks allows us to run the C++ physics server and the C++ user proxy embedded in the C# game server application. That's mostly a developer tool just so that somebody can start up a server and have all the essential bits. But it does have value on occasion when we run into situations like this where there is something hinky going on with the socket between the two.
Zube asks, the 64-bit client isn't slated for beta, is it?
I don't believe so.
No.
Coherent. So our old UI renderer, which was Ceph, the Chromium embedded framework, was the hurdle for getting the client to 64-bit. Once we have landed Coherent, we will still, for some time, have Ceph in place until we finish transitioning everything. We're going to be running both for a while so that we can migrate and ease the burden of getting Coherent in. But once Ceph is completely out of the client is when we can start working on getting a 64-bit client.
Green Jericho asks, will there be a PC requirement document for Beta 1 upon release?
Oh, yeah. We're going to have a lot of available documentation for what's going on. Beta
I think
1, day 1.
he's asking min spec.
Oh, min spec.
For Beta 1.
I would assume so. I mean, it's going to be a little hard for us to figure out. But I am fairly certain that's something we can get in there. There'll probably be a gray area of, look, this is a lot of, work in progress.
Here's a lovely question from Green Jericho. What strategies are you using to create an art style that is sustainable and more long-lasting? Great answer.
It's kind of a hard question.
You heard it, folks. 2018.
So basically right now, one of the hurdles that we've had with creating art with a small team is I would say that over the last 2 years, there's been a glut of assets available for that have been pulled from real world. We've used a lot of that stuff to very quickly get art in. I mean, I wish I had this type of stuff where you actually have a website you can go to that actually has things pulled from the real world.
What's your favorite word? Telegrammetry?
Oh, photogrammetry.
Photogrammetry.
So those assets are really great. I would typically anything that's very clearly a game that's trying to be really realistic only has a shorter shelf life on its visuals because the next engine comes out, the new technology comes out, and some new game gets built with that, and everybody goes ooh.
But the fact of the matter is, we have to release this game eventually, and we can't always be chasing the latest and greatest.
Right. So part of what I want to do is right now I'm more focused on just getting the assets needed and completed for what we need to do for Beta 1 Day 1. There's a lot of work to be done in all of that, like we've been doing with Scenario 2. What I would like to do is, once we get into beta, is spend a little bit of time looking at ways we can differentiate the textures just slightly so they're not meant to be totally realistic, maybe somewhere around 70% realistic, so there's a little bit of an edge in our artistic style. However,
so if you guys see any art that's like 60% realistic or
let me know.
80% realistic, make a ticket about it on the forums.
However, as we've encountered, like trying to make the different variations for the realms, that also becomes very time prohibitive, so we have to work really smart. One of the things I'm very curious about is a lot of the machine learning tools that a couple of different companies have been developing that allow you to basically define a style and then input your textures and then have it output that texture in that style. That's something that I'm kind of waiting on for someone to come out with a really great tool, because it would totally speed things up. So the direct answer is it's not something I am directly
so you want to
addressing.
deep fake your biomes?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's what it is. I mean, so if you go online and you look, there's a couple
Don't
of different.
Google that.
The what is it? The Van Gogh Starry Sky keeps getting. I've seen that used a couple of times, and it's basically we're going to teach the machine how to make a Van Gogh style of a photo or a painting, and then you take a picture of the two of us sitting on the couch, you pop it through this, an hour later you've got something that looks like Van Gogh painted it. That's the idea. So that kind of a thing could be a big time saver. I think once we get into beta 1, I'm going to say, look, we need to spend some more time figuring out how we want to adjust these things and create a pipe for doing that.
Are we talking like young Van Gogh or like brown period?
I don't know what brown period is. But it's one of those things I'm closely watching because I think it's going to be really valuable. Right now the tech is mostly being used for like up-resing old textures. So if you have like a Nintendo 64 game, you want to update all the textures and everything, it'll actually, instead of just scaling your textures up, redraw them. So things like that I think are going to be really useful. And if we can teach, hey, here's the bark for a tree and it's got this little nuance to it that makes it a TDD styling. If we can, we'll either have to create a pipe by hand for that, we'll have to do some outsourcing for that to speed that up, but I'm hoping to define that kind of once we get into beta.
Odilvik asks, using the in-game diagnostics for frame times, etc., is it possible to know if the player's computer is CPU or GPU limited?
That's a tough one. I haven't spent a lot of time recently with our tools to know what all client-side perf stuff is at your disposal, but we can probably make some really strong inferences about that.
Dark Society Network asks, does feature lock mean that we will be alpha testing the combined features of B1 right away, or will it still be focused on certain aspects?
Oh, most likely it's going to be focused.
It's probably going to be a little bit of all of the above. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of
We're going to do some tests where it's like, look, we need you guys to go in and bang on buildings and make sure they're sturdy. And it's going to be some tests where it's like, hey, we opened up all 7 islands, go fuck
run around. Yeah, run around, build, craft, use the plots. Let's see what all the things do.
This is a fun mental image. Odilvik asks, could falling cubes land on other cubes, causing those cubes to fail due to their combined weight, or will falling cubes impart damage?
So we have, right now, I believe players are the only things that get shock damage, which is if they move too quickly, they can take damage. At one time, we had the ability.
You mean like when we're bumping into?
Yeah, at one time you had the ability that you could like ram into somebody and cause them damage by shoving them back. So we would like to get there, but building debris is a whole nother category of things. Like we've got to get this stuff Andrew's been working on, which is the basic like building data structures and building pipes. We've got to get that sorted out so that we can get stability sorted out, so that we can start talking about debris and rubble again. So that's where we would like to go with those, but we're about 2 generations of technology and refactors on the buildings away from being concerned about that. So we'd like that, not there yet.
Dark Society Network asks, recent animations of abilities look like they are classical full-body animations. Does that mean that despite your cool animation system, you'll still have to animate the same ability for all possible item combinations?
So the animations that are going in, some of them are full body, some of them are not full body. It kind of it depends on what the animation is. There's certain things that are minor that don't need brand new animations that we can reuse old ones and like append them to the character. So right now, I mean, like the animations that are in there, we're still doing the same thing. The only thing we are not doing right now, because we're making class specific things, is like where we did the different arms and legs paired together. However, let me think ahead here. So right now the Black Knight has his own new unique idol. He's got a shield and a sword. There really is no reason that we wouldn't continue to reuse Frankensteining the different animations together. It just depends on the asset. And like I said, we're still doing it. It's just not to the same degree that we did in the past. But I foresee us continuing to do it when we start doing all the different weapon permutations for these unique classes.
Well, we seem to have gotten through all the art and programming questions. There's some design questions that we can't...
yeah, when you see Ben or Mark, those
on.
are good design questions.
Ask Max all the design questions in Mornings with Max.
Yeah, just spam me with questions that I can't answer.
He loves that.
I got to go back and hear this rap from this morning.
Alrighty. Well, maybe to close things out, Sacrix wants to know, what are you guys working on right now?
Oh God, right now I'm working on a lot of different things. So my general day is oversight, mainly with the art team. You want to come show off your horn?
Andrew's horny and he wants us to know.
Great, thanks.
Wait, Andrew, what are you working on right now?
You already told him.
Not buildings.
Not buildings?
Yeah, actually, I decided I, really want mud huts.
Mud huts? We're gonna mud huts?
Yeah, we're gonna the mud skipper, that fish that just sort of like wallows down into riverbanks. Yeah, that's what we're doing for buildings now.
I'm not really sure what you're talking about, but it sounds magical. All I'm figuring out is you're making buildings.
All I heard was hobbit holes.
Buildings that just fall apart. So most of my day is keeping track of what all the artists are doing and being responsible for that. What I'm working on right now is a cross between performance improvements to existing environment art assets and working on some new assets to get them ready and in mods for use in the general rest of the islands.
Most of today has been me wrangling and keeping an eye on the fixes for the tests so that we can do that this evening. And right before the stream, I was getting that going, and I got some of the alphas from Discord in on that, and getting us some more metrics so that we actually have pretty graphs that can show us when stuff's on fire instead of hearing from you guys.
Yeah, and granted, I skipped that. Fridays are usually my get in, work on the top 10, work on the update, get images from the artists, and then keep in touch with whatever the testing plan is and get emails out according to that.
But Andrew actually makes content.
Yes,
yeah.
Andrew actually.
So this is supposed to be like the last major block of code that I'm personally responsible for.
Except for that other one.
Nah. Yeah, so I'm going to mostly be focused on, chasing around the big picture and emergency triage of specific areas to drag this thing across the finish line for the next, for the next couple months.
Yeah, so things are going well.
We have a bunch of guys, Andrew, George, myself a little bit, Mark Hernandez a little bit. They're all sort of fire extinguishers, and we try and rotate out our fire extinguishers, and Andrew's shift is coming up.
Yeah, well,
yeah, that's right. Yeah, Andrew's been heads down for quite a while on the building work.
Yeah, it's been a very weird thing to be like that micro-focused on just writing my code instead of paying a lot of attention to the rest of the team. So there's a huge testimony to, George, Nash, and Tim, and Tyler.
Nothing's burned down yet.
That,
Nothing's burned down that we can tell.
That we can tell. That'll be part of what he finds.
That's next week.
Yeah. So, I'm coming out of my hole, and buildings will be buildy again.
Yeah, the good thing is, I mean, from my perspective, and I've kind of noticed it with the top 10 over the last couple of weeks, is a lot of people are hitting, quite a few people on the team are hitting a lot of different things each week. So that's why I've started kind of making these lists. You'll see like Christina, Matt, Bull, myself, some of the artists. There's a lot of these little things that we're hitting, and a lot of them are sometimes things that we don't tell you guys all the details of, lots of little bug fixes and tweaks. And that's kind of because we've got these big things that some people are working in to get in, and everyone else is kind of cleaning up everything as we narrow the focus in for June and July.
It's also been cool with the weekend tests because more and more the gripes have not been my client crashed
this
or
was
the
good.
server crashed. It's I think that ability is overpowered.
Yeah. So
and a month out for beta, that's a place that actually makes us feel pretty good.
The two, you know, what makes me feel not so good is that I don't hear anyone on the Tuatha complaining that other people are OP.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, so we actually,
which means the Tuatha are OP.
We had a
everyone's complaining equally.
Oh, it's absolutely true.
We had a conversation that was like, look, you know, I think it was in the last weekend testing, you know, there's balancing issues and people wanting to be on one side than the other. That's a good thing to be worried about now. It's not, you know, people are actually playing the game and having fun and wanting to play, and just balance issues is a great place to be. We're not, like you said, the server's not crashing, except for our physics issue.
Except for that one.
But yeah, I mean, as we narrow this down, our focus is going to be more increasingly into the full game loop and getting testing on that. And like that one person had asked, it's going to be a mix of a whole loop of things or just one very specific thing. And that's part of what we wanted to do in most of beta, was just be able to, you know, do some quick tests. Like, hey, you can run real fast. We need you to run to the other side of the island, gather some stuff, build a building, and let's see what breaks. You know, really, really quick focus test.
The thing that came to mind is there's subtleties of physics that we've sort of latched onto as interesting, like the shock damage.
Yeah.
So when you say like run to the other side of the island real fast, like we
don't
as
collide with
admins
trees.
can turn on like admin speed and run really fast, and you can like run so fast that the wind drag will murder you.
Yeah.
Oops, tree.
Yeah.
We have the flash problem.
Yeah, you will suddenly, you can also just bump into something or someone and kill yourself. Yeah. Yeah, we have physics. Lots of physics.
I don't know. We've got a minute, but we can always run long. If someone asked about Rubble and then Andrew showed up, I don't know if you want to talk about Rubble.
Yeah, that's actually a good segue.
It was basically like, there's lots of cool stuff we want to do there. We haven't gotten there. I don't know if you want to talk about it more than that.
So putting back in kind of the major infrastructure of buildings, which the reason Rubble hasn't happened is because the overhead of sending changes to buildings over the network to large numbers of people was prohibitive for us. We were not in a great place on that. And, you know, that's the big thing that I've been working towards, which is getting it to a point where, you know, you can say, hey, all right, this building no longer has a tower, but there's this new entity that is a tower-shaped chunk, and let's just make that go into the world. And those kinds of large-scale changes of buildings and sending them out to thousands of players efficiently has been the big picture problem. So there's a few more things to hook back in of just, all right, this UI button is not connected to making buildings go on the server.
You mean coming up next after this?
Yeah. So, but the core stuff is, oh god, finally done.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm so happy.
So if you missed Andrew's stream, not this week, last week I think it was, where you had the Mario Land thing we talked about. Yep. Yeah, that's a good stream to check out, where that you can see that it's all fully networked.
Maybe I'll do something.
Fairly large changes to buildings.
It was fully networked before. It was just poorly networked.
Yeah.
Before.
Well, my point being, it always
you
was.
Have
it's
100
better.
people running around on that.
It's going fast
changing.
enough that it's worth pointing out that there's not a trick being done
there. We'll probably do something in a scenario with that just as a fun one-off test.
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason, there is a lot of care being put into this project, not only to make it something cool and new, but also something that's fun, and part of that just takes longer. I mean, we literally have arrows that can collide in the air. I mean, I've seen it happen. Two people will be shooting arrows and they'll hit each other in the air, and both people will see it. I mean,
It's what we call emergent gameplay.
yeah, I mean, that's
we've
the
seen
big
stuff where like you can shoot a hole in a keep, and that hole is just big enough for your arrow to shoot through, and then you'll shoot through the arrow to kill somebody on the other side of the keep.
Yeah, I mean, there's a, like he said, this is Tim. You and I were talking about tabletop games we've played, and one of the things that's so much fun about those is all the entropy and the emergent type of things that happen while you're playing tabletop, and that's kind of what all this networked physics stuff lets us do.
And there's, I mean, like, good player versus player games do not have a ton of randomness,
right.
In that, I hit you and you hit me, and nothing in either of our control had determined the outcome. But what I like, but at the same time, if the outcome of that is always the same, it's not an interesting game that you or I are going to want to play. And like all of these environmental things coming together are really the crux of what my vision for this game has been since the very beginning, which is that, it's not random. It's a
known
fair,
level of randomness.
But the number of
flip in
things that are happening in the world mean that it's not always going to be the same either, but you can understand why.
Yeah.
It's not
you
just
know,
like
you know what can happen.
Invisible hand of God rolled a dice and you won or lost. It's like, oh yeah, you know.
We don't want you guys battling the RNG. We want you murdering each other.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm more powerful than him, but I lost because bad luck. It's I'm more powerful than him, but I lost because someone else interfered in this way, which caused this thing, which,
But it definitely wasn't because you were worse than him.
Oh, definitely not. But yeah, I mean, even like talking about rubble, that's the same kind of thing. That needs to run really well so that,
so
things
that chunks
that are
of rubble can land on people.
Right, so they can land on people, and you can go, oh shit, I thought I had this all planned out, and that guy knocked the building out, and I didn't know it was going to happen, but it is a thing I know can happen. Yeah, so we're all still very excited, and things are going well.
Ship it.
Ship it.
Ship it. I ship it.
Well,
Actually, I ship that.
Ready to wrap
Yeah,
it up?
I think we're good.
Okay.
No, there's no random gift or something.
I don't think
So,
Like, these
Well,
are
is
awesome.
there-
Look at this.
is there a non-random but emergent gift?
Is there an emergent gift?
We talked early in the stream that we've got to go back and audit the testing that's been happening during the stream. Assuming that went well, there is a very strong chance we'll be doing an alpha test this weekend. So keep an eye open for the email that goes out.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll also have the update email with the top 10-ish written out. So keep an eye out for that as well. All right, we'll see you later.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.